The biggest controversy we had last year in the NBA was who was the MVP, and more specifically, who Kendrick Perkins had first on his ballot. As you guys remember, he heavily implied Jokic he was stat padding, only winning MVP because of his skin color. And he even went one step further, saying the voters had some weird motive, some bias to pick Jokic over Embiid. Now, of course, these claims, these allegations, they had no base in reality or in actual facts. As when it came to Kendrick Perkins, his entire argument, his entire thesis was built on lies and inaccurate stats. Now, since that moment, Kendrick Perkins kind of took 2 steps back, he backtracked slightly, and after the NBA Finals, took heavy cover. But now, roughly 2 months later, Perkins is once again coming out of the woodworks, defending his Jokic take and rewriting history.
This is the problem that I have when it came down to the Jokic situation. It was clips and pieces that people pulled out instead of watching the whole episode, right? So it started with me and Stephen A. debating about Jokic and Embiid, right? And all I was saying was it was about 30-something games left into the season. My thing was that how in the hell with it 30-some games left in the season, we already saying that the MVP race is over.
Now, stopping it right there, Perkins already is lying through his teeth, as what he's trying to claim is these clips from ESPN were taken out of context and his argument was misconstrued. Now look, I don't watch all of First Take, the entire hour and a half, but I did watch this segment in its entirety. As when the actual story broke, Perkins had this take, ESPN posted a lengthy segment that was 14 minutes long. For YouTube standards, that's a pretty healthy clip with some good context both ways. And if you actually watched this clip, what they were talking about and debating was Kendrick Perkins calling Jokic a stat padder who was trying to average a triple-double on purpose. Perkins trying to rewrite history, saying this segment was only about the MVP being declared too early is entirely inaccurate. As what Perkins says verbatim is that why he was upset with his fans, they declared the race over with 30 games left in this season. Now, that's not entirely true, as when Perkins made these comments initially, it was February 28th, meaning Denver already had played 63 games and the All-Star break was 2 weeks prior. At that point in the season, what you're doing, you're really winding down, getting ready for the playoffs, and your MVP picks, they're kind of solidified and almost set in stone. If you want to accuse Kendrick Perkins of lying, rewriting history, or just having a bad memory, go ahead and choose one, because it's pretty obvious he's doing at least one of these in this clip.
Like, no, man, we got 30 games left. Joel is balling. Like, that is unfair to him. That was my first argument. Like, we're not going to do that. I never said that Jokic wasn't deserving. Now, we get to the stat pattern part. People still talk about that to this day. All I said was this. Everybody in the league at some point of their career, including myself, has stat padded.
Now, what Perkins is doing here, not so sneakily, is trying to obscure the point by saying everyone stat pads. I don't really agree with that statement, but to each his own. The overall point Perkins made in his initial claim, was that Jokic the individual was indeed stat padding. Again, no proof, no evidence, no actual games of him doing it. Perkins just said it out of the blue. But his new comments saying everyone stat pads. It makes you think, if everyone does it, why was Jokic supposedly doing it an actual problem? Think about that. So does that mean Kendrick Perkins picked Jokic out of every player, just singled in on him? Because remember, according to him, everyone's stat pads and everyone's done it. And I don't want this to be lost on you guys. Perkins' actual argument for Jokic being a stat padder, it was based on shot attempts and assists by month and by week. And what he doesn't ignore, doesn't understand, that Denver's team throughout the entire season was injured and banged up. as Michael Porter Jr., for big chunks in November and December, was out of the lineup. When he was out of the lineup, Jokic was asked to score more and shoot more. When he came back in, he was more of a passer, as was a facilitator. And looking at Jamal Murray and Aaron Gordon, in late January, early February, both those guys missed a lot of time. When they were out, Jokic took more shots. When they came back, he took less shots. It's not complicated, it's not some conspiracy theory. When his teammates were hurt, he took more shots. When they weren't, he took less. It's literally that simple.
The only problem that I had with JJ is when he said, I accuse people of being racist. I never accused nobody of being racist, bro. Like, accusing somebody, and correct me if I'm wrong, racist is that you hate someone of another color. Am I right or am I wrong? That's racist, right?
That sounds right.
Yeah, that's right. So I never said that.
So I think Perkins right here actually makes a pretty good point, pretty good distinction. And I think calling Perkins any name or saying he hates white players, I don't actually believe that or think that. What I think's more logical, more reasonable, I guess, is that Perkins, when it comes to NBA takes, doesn't have good takes and isn't a good analyst. And why I think he had this take about Jokic being a stat patter, having the voters biased in his favor, it was to boost up Embiid, who he was promoting as the MVP. I think it's that simple. Perkins, the actual analyst, doesn't hate Jokic because of his skin color. All he cared about in the moment was getting Embiid the MVP. And the irony of all this, Perkins, for roughly 80% of the season, said Embiid was better than Jokic, and he was the MVP. But in that last 20%, Perkins flipped on a dime and put Giannis number one. Kendrick Perkins last year was one of the biggest disruptors ever for an MVP race. I'm not saying he swayed the entire thing, that's impossible, but I would say a chunk of the voters, maybe 10, 15, even 20%, because of Perkins' comments, probably changed their vote and went with Embiid over Jokic, as was Giannis.
Bro, when Obama ran for president, I know black people out of my community that never voted in their life. Me, personally, I never voted in my life. You know, I rushed to go vote for Obama because I actually wanted to see a black president in office. Does that make me racist? Does that make a black person racist? No, it don't. And it happens. Like, you ain't doing it intentionally, but just because you may be rooting for someone of your own kind doesn't make you a racist.
So we took a really weird, sharp left turn right there. And I understand what Perkins was trying to say, bring up Obama, all that stuff. But again, Perkins making his point, he's not the best guy to thread this needle. And I think dumbing it down really simplistically, when it comes to MVP, any award, it should be an objective choice based off merit and not skin color, other things that don't factor into a player being an actual good player. And look, when it comes to Embiid, of course, he wasn't my pick to an MVP. But I'm not going to sit here and lie to you guys, say Embiid's case wasn't at least half decent, because it obviously was. But if there's two players, let's just say Giannis and Jokic, they're neck and neck for MVP, just you can't even tell the difference. I'm not going to pick one guy or the other based off skin color and these weird criteria that's not even about basketball or their play on the court. And even in the future, if there's an MVP race with Tatum versus Jokic, an American-born player versus a foreign player, I'm not going to pick Tatum solely because he's American just like me. I'm going to look at both players, their cases, and evaluate them accordingly. My overall point being, 2023, it took a massive hit to the MVP and its credibility. It already wasn't great, but Embiid winning it, Perkins pushing his narratives, made it even worse and less valuable. In addition to that, it didn't help Jokic, who lost the award, won the entire championship, and Embiid flamed out again in the second round. And the last point I do want to make when it comes to Perkins, I don't think this guy's a hateful person, hates Jokic, or hates white players. What I think he is a bad analyst, kind of a buffoon, and just a clown in general. There's a big, big difference. As always, thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you next time.